All right, everyone. The jailing of political dissidents is common across the third world. In the first world, we don't jail them. We just mass deplatform them and basically ruin their lives. So-called civilization. What an advancement. Very sophisticated. Very culturally progressive. Anyway, the Moroccan government jailed a YouTuber recently, Mohamed Sekkaki, and I may be pronouncing that name wrong. And this is the next in a long line of similar behavior that we've seen, not just in Morocco, but in other countries as well, where someone who merely creates content, in some cases not even citizens or residents of those countries, simply happens to be there. Like you go as a tourist to China, but you said the wrong thing on YouTube last year, so you get thrown in the gulag too. It could become a problem. We've seen this happening. And it's happening more and more often because of the network of influence online becoming more and more powerful. And so, like 10 years ago, if someone on YouTube said, fuck China, Chinese government didn't really care. Now, if they say that, it becomes a bigger deal, potentially, because that could influence tourism. So you've especially someone involved with more of the pop culture side of things, certainly fashion, maybe the more hip side of political commentary or news. That can actually affect a country's bottom line and actually affect world diplomacy. So it can also become a big problem when a person gets jailed for essentially just insulting the monarchy of Morocco, insulting the government or royal family or whatever they have there. It becomes a wider problem, which is that people like myself that are on parts of the internet deliberately designed to give your opinion as well as analysis, it makes it real fucking difficult to travel and to do normal things, because on the one hand, and this is for someone who's in the developed world, here in the United States, for example, my commentary may not be edgy enough to get me deplatformed, but if it were edgier, if I had edgier political beliefs, I could be shut out by a bank, shut out by certain social media sites, certainly, shut off by payment processors, shut out by web registrars, basically the whole 90s security features like Cloudflare, basically anything under the sun. In addition, then, also not be able to go elsewhere simply because there, not only do you get deplatformed, you get jailed. And so actually there are a few countries that are sort of averse to this, like Thailand or certain Southeast Asian countries, the Philippines, parts of East Europe as well. There are some countries that are holdouts in which the companies don't really care if you're politically incorrect, and there's not a whole lot of moralism. And if it is, it tends to be more limited. Morocco actually isn't all things considered even that bad. It's just, you insulted the government. You're not allowed to do that. It's not. China's made this argument. It's not free speech because it disturbs the public or something. Some stupid fucking authoritarian bullshit like that. He should be released. The idea that insulting a government should be punishable is hilarious. It's totally at odds with civilization. I think what needs to be done is the Western world should be using its diplomatic and technological leverage to try to stop this from happening. Like even just 10 years ago, there were huge movements online, put pressure on China to have, child labor laws and basic free speech and the ability of people to at least petition grievances. There was an attempt to sort of influence the East. And now it seems like it goes in reverse, where the third world regimes actually sort of dictate tech policy, and there's no real effort by the US and similar countries to lean on them because they're trying to adopt the same draconian moral laws here. And we see, therefore, what happened to this YouTuber in Morocco. I'm instantly reminded of some of the laws being proposed in the EU to basically do the same thing. How is it any different? And you've got a Chinese-style social credit system already in use in the Western world. It's just that it's only aimed at a very small minority of political dissidents, people on the extreme, people on the fringe. It's not yet being aimed at everyone. Whereas in China, it's aimed at most people. In China, a very large proportion of the population is hindered by the fact that they're considered malcontent or wrong-think. They're asocial or something. In the West, it's a handful of people on YouTube, a handful of people on Facebook, a handful of organizations. It's a very small minority. The reason why they've done that is that if you have less centralistic control, because you certainly have less in the US or Europe than you have in China, what you need to do is you need to start very small. Convince people that it's a good thing. No, it's just the fringe. It's just the 1% of the 1% that are being the most rowdy. We want to prevent them from doing banking because they're basically terrorists because they have bad views. And then next, it'll be the new fringe. It'll be the new group of people that hasn't yet been suppressed, and it'll march on in that direction. That's my fear. So my fear isn't the censorship we have now, it's the censorship around the corner. This is the same as with disease. It's not the epidemic you've got contained, it's when it mutates and turns into something else more virulent, more contagious. There should be universal condemnation for this decision. Instead, all you see is a handful of people on YouTube talk about it and it spreads no further. Hell, Google and these other companies have done such a good job now at suppressing things from going viral that it's impossible to actually make people outside of your core audience aware of what's going on. I no longer even expect to grow on YouTube. I've been stagnant now for days. I expect that basically to continue. Meanwhile, I'm top dog on BitChute. I'm still growing on Minds, I'm still growing on Gabs, everything else. Everything else is all above board and marching along, except for the one site I put the most effort into. So I'm going to have to bitch about that separately. So Mohamed Sekkaki should definitely be released. The nation of Morocco should be condemned for this. This decision, it should lead to him being, why don't you fucking let him go somewhere else where he won't be in jail, where he can actually do his thing. I think he's a fairly large YouTuber. I didn't look him up directly because I believe he does more of the citizen journo sort of thing. I pay attention to that a little bit less than the analysis side. This even happens to people who have millions and millions of fans all around the world. They go to some country where their fans like, hey, you know, come to Taiwan and do a meet and greet, and then they get there and then they run afoul of some random moral law, like they spit their gum out, they end up 10 years in the salt quarry. It's crazy. There should be some degree of latitude for people who, altogether, let's face it, most creators and influencers are not well-traveled. And then when they become well-traveled, they get thrown in a gulag or something, or they get, you know, stopped by highwaymen. It's become a little bit of a hassle, I think, for people. I travel, but I'm only going to the Netherlands. I'm well aware of the fact that if I step into Germany or France, I could get randomly stopped by the KGB and you know, sodomized with probes and questioned for 10 hours under heat lamps simply for having the wrong political views. So I think I'll just stay in the Dutch Highlands, which is whatever building you happen to be in the upper floor of at the time. That's about all. Peace out.